found ways to build connection and community, even through the screen. We have been a model for ministry on the margins, providing services for isolated Unitarian Universalists, becoming a spiritual lifeline for our members in prison, and investing in innovative ministry. We know better than anyone how deep and meaningful connections can be formed even from a distance. Unitarian Universalists have faced many challenges in these times, and we continue to persevere and to fight for justice and equity for all people, especially during moments of crisis. We are proud to be a leader in this faith movement, and we invite you to get involved in our ministry. We strive to be a place where anyone from anywhere can find spiritual refuge anytime they need it. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Larger Fellowship. We are so excited to bring you an all-new episode of The View. The View is a weekly Unitarian Universalist talk show discussing important faith-based topics from an anti-racist, anti-oppressive, and multicultural perspective. Every Thursday for the past 7 years, we have welcomed guests from every corner of the world. Our guests are writers, scholars, activists, and religious thought leaders who are shaping Unitarian Universalism and society for the 21st century and beyond. I hope today's show inspires you. Hope it builds your faith. Hope it gives you perspective to see the power of Unitarian Universalism at work in your life. Enjoy the message.
Welcome to today's episode of The View, Voices of Unitarian Universalism. We're so excited that you are here, that we are here, that we are all here together. We are going to be talking with seminarians in ministerial formation today. But first, as always, our host roundup. And you all get the extra special day of it being Aisha and I. So I wish I had Marisol Caballero's F-bomb in my hand, crocheted F-bomb in my hand, because that is definitely, I'm sure, where we're going today at some point. Hi, everyone. I'm Christina Rivera, she, her pronouns. I'm coming to you from beautiful Borinquen, also known as Puerto Rico, where it is warm and sunny as per usual, and excited to be here. Aisha, how you doing?
Hi, I'm Aisha Hauser. I'm in Seattle, Washington, land of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Duwamish, and it is not warm and sunny. It is, we've been having snow, rain. So Seattle's an interesting place because we have microclimates because of the mountains and the hills. So somebody 5 miles away could have already 3 inches of snow. And here it's mostly snow and ice. But the point is, it is not Caribbean weather. And I have no feelings about that at all. So I'm wishing you the best, Chris, with your warm sun. Yeah, that's cool. You know, sending the love.
You know, somebody's got to do it.
I'm glad you're there.
Somebody's got
to be. Listen, I lived on the Caribbean for 2 years. I know how magical it is. So I will visit you one of these days.
It really is. I'm blessed, and you all are welcome. You all out there in Viewland, you too are welcome. And we're excited. We're excited to welcome Roddy Bell Sheldon and Lucretia Williams as our seminarian in ministerial formation. But first, we are looking at our View UU Universe Roundup. And we are super excited because Giving Tuesday was just, 2 days ago? Day ago. It feels like pandemic time just feels like it's all like the same day.
It's not real.
And we at the Church of the Larger Fellowship, I love the tagline that Tanner Linden came up with that said, "We are not asking for your money." Or I think Tanner did it say, "We don't want your money." That's what it was. "We don't want your money," which I just thought was wonderful to see on Giving Tuesday. And we invited people to sign up to be pen pals for incarcerated Unitarian Universalists. Tanner is going to put the link in the chat, but you can still sign up because we always have a waiting list of incarcerated Unitarian Universalists who would like a pen pal. It's super easy. It's a commitment of writing once a month. Beth Murray, our fabulous prison ministry administrator, does tremendous support for our Free World Pen Pal writers. There is ways of getting, support of like, what do I write? Or this thing happened. We've got a Facebook group for Pen Pal writers. We've got an email address that you can sign up. We've got guidelines. We try and make it as easy as humanly possible. And it really means the world to incarcerated UUs to be able to know that they've got some mail coming to them. So congratulations to the prison ministry team. Yay, because we've got over 100 signups. We could use more.
Yay.
Yay. And the only other Giving Tuesday shout out I want to give out is to, because it's still going on, is our own prison ministry manager, Sir Lebert, has a graphic novel, not a graphic novel, it's actually a comic book collective that is has received a grant, and they need to match their grant in order to receive the grant. It is a BIPOC-centered comic book series, and both the series and the artists are BIPOC-centered. It's fabulous. You can go to my Facebook page, and there's a link to it. You can go to Sir's Facebook page, and there's a link to it. And I definitely encourage folks to reach out and support because it's awesome. Anything else in UU Roundup, Aisha, that we're missing? I'm sure there is.
Yeah, I don't know what's happening.
Article
my
2
dog.
Article 2 Study Commission came out. I love it. Article 2 Study Commission came out with their draft proposal, and you can find information about them on the UUA.org website. And they have some listening sessions scheduled, so check those out. Yeah.
And I think they're coming on The View again, no?
And I think,
or we will have them on The View.
We've already said that Reverend Dr. Sophia Betancourt is the nominee for UUA president, right? Yes. But we can't say it enough. So yay, we're very excited. Reverend Dr. Sophia Betancourt is the UUA nominee for UUA president. The election will take place at General Assembly in June of 2023. Check out Reverend Betancourt's website, where she talks about being the only nominee and how she wants to engage with the election process, even if that continues to be the case, if she is the only nominee. It does not mean we will not be hearing from her in the regular ways that we hear from nominees. And she's already got some really great, fabulous materials on her website, so check that out. Anything else? Yay! Well, go ahead.
Yeah, I think we're ready for our folks.
We're ready for our folks.
Hello.
All right. Hello. So today we are joined by Lucretia Williams. Lucretia Williams is maybe familiar to those of you at the CLF because she is our learning fellow. Yay! And has been on The View a couple of times so far. And our other guest today is Roddy Bell Shelton, who is a queer, BIPOC, non-binary, they, them pronouns, seminarian, and aspiring public theologian. As of the fall of this year, Roddy is serving a two-year part-time intern ministry at the UU Federal Fellowship in Fredericksburg, Virginia, just down the way from me. We are very excited to have Roddy in our cluster, where they continue and to seek to complete their seminary in education at Meadville Lombard Theological School. Shout out to the team at Meadville Lombard. We love you. And owning both the Christian faith and the African spiritualities of their ancestors, Roddy is grounded in Unitarian Universalism faith communities by choice. Roddy is called to lead radical love, care, and sanctuary movements, simultaneously disrupting the patriarchy and systems of oppression that are plaguing our world. Yay, we need more of that. They genuinely believe that we must do everything in love, 1 Corinthians 16:14, as we do justice, love mercy, and tread humbly, Micah 6:8. Thank you so much for being here, Roddy. Did I miss anything in your intro? I'm sure there's more.
I mean, it could be a book, but
Right?
it's so great to be here, and it's so wonderful to be in the Virginia cluster with you, Chris.
Yay! When I heard that Roddy was going to be in our
So
cluster,
my
I was very
question
excited.
I wanted to ask Roddy how you came to Unitarian Universalism. Actually, both of you can tell folks how you came to Unitarian Universalism and a little bit about your call to ministry.
Yeah, so I came to the UU Church through activism. I grew up Presbyterian. After coming out as queer at 13 and seeing that the church really didn't value who I was as a person, I left religion and swore I'd never go back. Got really involved in community justice organizing, social justice movements, been the lead of some national LGBTQ movements, working with the Human Rights Campaign and GLSEN, helped organize and plan rallies and protests in Knoxville, Tennessee, where I grew up. And kind of through all of that work, the Tennessee Valley UU Church was always showing up. So recognizing that, I would call the intern minister at the time, the Reverend John Coffey, and say, hey, John, this protest is happening in downtown, and we really need people. Do you think you could get people there? Yeah, I think we can do that. So over the course of 4 or 5 years, I kept seeing UU show up. The 2016 election rolls around. We all know what happened. And I was one of those people that was the influx of UUs in 2017. So January 1st was a Sunday. Found myself in worship at Tennessee Valley. Found myself answering a call to ministry that I'd been ignoring for years a year later. And starting seminary in the fall of 2021. Oh, yeah, fall of 2021.
Yeah. So I grew up Pentecostal Christian. Both sides of my family ran churches. And so that was not something that was new to me, sort of being steeped in a faith community. But similar to what Roddy said, like being queer was something that I also wasn't really aware of at the time while I was still in the church. But it was heavily homophobic. And I said, okay, well, I can't, be a part of this, even if I necessarily am not ready to claim that identity for myself, because I was still thinking about that. So I moved overseas, and then I came back to the United States in 2019, and I was like, okay, I think I really need to build like a spiritual community of some kind. And I had heard about Unitarian Universalism because I was like, okay, I can't do sort of fundamentalist churches or literal Bible readings. I was like, I need something that's kind of expansive. And I heard about United Church of Christ, and then I also heard about Unitarian Universalism. And I was like, let's go UU. And so I'm originally from Chicago. So I was like, all right, let's Google. And so I joined the nearest congregation near me, which is Unity Temple in Oak Park. And then more Googling led me to the View, which led me to you all. And so and then I said, after going to General Assembly this year, I was like, well, I think I need to go to seminary. And so I started seminary this fall. I'm just finishing up my first semester. So yeah.
How are you finding seminary?
How does that feel? Yeah.
It's going really fast, really, really fast. Way faster than I thought it would. And I don't know how you feel, Roddy, but it's not the work that's difficult. It's not, hard to read. Well, it's a little hard to read. There's a lot to read, but it's more the spiritual transformation that happens through reading all of this, through all the journaling, through all the writing that we have to do. And then being in cohort with people, I find really interesting because there are so many people from different walks of life that are in my class, and hearing their stories and how they want to dismantle systemic oppression has really been helping me form my own theology.
Definitely. And I totally hear you, Lucretia. It's definitely not kind of the work itself, but it's going to class and thinking, oh, this is who God is. And then the next class being told, yep, nope, God's not that. Divine's not that. Oh, you thought you knew what theology was. Well, today everything is changing. It's just kind of a thing. And it's really the emergence of being willing to be transformed, to have your heart broken and reopened and transformed again. And then to know that you are ultimately bearing witness to everything that's going on or trying to get your own shit together.
Definitely. And also, I had a lot of discernment around whether to join seminary in the first place. And I tried to get a lot of information from people who were involved in different ways in congregations. So I know there's like religious educators, there's people who do administrative, and I was like, ooh, is ministry the place for me in this way? And I'm going to start King remotely. So I'm also in New York right now.
So we have our two UU seminaries represented, Stark King and Meadville. They are the only two Unitarian Universalist exclusive seminaries. Exclusive? They're the only denominational, I don't know what they're called. Is it denominational? UU. They're called UU seminaries. I'm overthinking it. It's early here in Seattle. What has been the hardest part so far of seminary or the journey? Like what do you wish so far was part of the process that maybe isn't?
I need to think about that. That's a
Yeah.
good question. I think perhaps because there's a process within UU to start as an aspirant, and then you go on and on to different levels before you become ordained or not. And maybe before that first step, perhaps more ways to connect to people. I just happen to know because I was working here at the Church of Large Fellowship, so I had people to workshop with. But I think if you don't have that, you may need a lot more help in your discernment process. So maybe a way to connect with people before even applying, or if you're pretty serious about applying. I think that would have been really helpful.
I definitely think that having a system in place that in a way kind of shows what you're getting into and not just showing up. It's like, okay, I'm accepted to seminary now. What does that mean? And showing up and being told what that means day one.
Hmm.
And being able to explore and lean into that, like Lucretia was saying, with others kind of beforehand. So like workshopping that, possibly being connected with a fellowship to mentor a little bit sooner in the process. Like you're thinking about applying to seminary, so let's put you with somebody, rather than how Meadville's model is you are put with somebody, but it's a couple weeks into your first semester. And so then you start asking those questions and you're already kind of in the thick of things. So, like Lucretia, I was fortunate to have relationships with a lot of UU ministers and religious professionals. And so I was asking those questions as I was preparing to go in. But some of my peers and colleagues in seminary now didn't have that. And so they started asking those questions as they were also being asked to transform and to reevaluate and to construct their theology and to live into ministry and to read the MFC book list at the same time, which if you've not explored that, there was a massive list and it's a part of it. And very few people actually ever tell you that that's a part of it. So I feel like there needs to be clearer conversations from seminaries before we show up to say this is what showing up looks like. And not now that you've shown up, here's what's expected.
Yeah. Well, it's good this is recorded. Somebody will send it to the MFC. I think these are excellent ideas.
And I wonder how much of that is, I wonder if the question I had been formulating in my mind was, both of you are experiencing this through your BIPOC lens, through your Black, Indigenous, POC lens. And I wonder how that has made the experience different for you than maybe some of your white peers. And I wonder if that's part of it, because I know for me, that lens has a lot to do with being in relationship with people and like talking with people and being mentored by people. And to your point, Roddy, like I'm sure somewhere on their websites, either in the UUA website or the seminary's website, it probably says like, here's the list of things that you're gonna need to, but I feel like that's something that I want to talk with somebody about, making that commitment to before I make that commitment, right? I want to be in relationship with somebody or with the institution before. So it's not about like, is that information available? It's like, what cultural practices are you putting into place that are culturally relevant to folks. Does that make sense? I'm babbling.
No, totally. And I mean, I will say Meadville, and I'm sure Stalking does the same, is they're 100% willing to have those conversations, but it's just going and saying, hey, what does this mean? It's like, I read this thing and it doesn't make sense. Can we talk about it? And the answer is always going to be yes, and that's a great question, and we're going to explore it. But just kind of got to take that initiative and ask, and nobody's going to come to you and say, here are the 7 things you need to know when coming into seminary. You've got to come and say, I'm thinking about doing this, and does this look like? So, I mean, all that information is on the website, as you named, Chris, but it's kind of there, and then it's on seminarians, on religious professionals, on Unitarian Universalist, to take that and to go ask somebody about it, because there's so much information out there.
I think there's I think in general this kind of echoes the conversation that I've been hearing about going to seminary in general, sort of wanting there to be more of a shepherding process or an understanding of how the institution works. And I'm coming from the outside of it. Like I don't know, I have family members who are UU ministers or anything like that. So hearing about all the processes for the first time was a little bit overwhelming. And I will be doing the interview process. So to your point, or sorry, the internship. um, and to your point, Chris, about through our BIPOC lens, there's this reality of like, maybe I might have to move because there aren't any close to me that can support a internship, for example, a congregation. And like, what does that mean socioeconomically to expect people to migrate like that, or work, 2 years at a low salary, and I knew that going into it because I wanted to do this, but I also feel like there could be a lot more support. And I'm sure it is changing, but I'm currently in a cohort where that's not completely figured out yet. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely does have a huge impact, Aisha, because I did move for my internship and I chose to move for several factors. And I was privileged enough to be able to do that with my identities in place, being queer, non-binary, and BIPOC. I was still able to kind of pick up my life in Tennessee and move to Virginia. And it's been wonderful, but also recognizing, like you just named, not every seminarian, and especially not those of marginalized identities, have that privilege or that ability to say, oh, there was 5 UU churches in my state, and I'm a member of 2 of them. One of them doesn't like the other one, so I can't serve there. So where does that leave me? And ultimately, it is sometimes moving, especially if there isn't a congregation within 100 miles of you, or it becomes a issue of, do I commute 3 days a week? What about childcare for those who have young children? What about, and like the list could go on, but that's a piece that's, I feel, is being addressed more now, coming out of a global pandemic. Some of my colleagues and those in classes are in virtual internships still. So they are serving a congregation 200 miles from them on Zoom and are expected to be there once a quarter, once a month. And it's just kind of leaning into that 21st century ministry motto that we were talking about.
Well, I wonder, I am a religious educator, so I did not go the seminary route. And I'm curious about non-parish internships. Are the internships mandated to be for the MFC parish, or can they be community ministry? Can internships be different places?
They can absolutely be different places. There was a big push for them to be more parish-based, but that's slowly changing as well. I know some people have done their internship as a hospital chaplain. So after that first unit of CPE, which is required for UU ordination, they just go on and do that 1-year residency. The MFC takes that, counts that. Somebody in my cohort is currently doing those at a more community shelter and are serving as a chaplain and organizer in that capacity for their internship. So, I mean, it's really, again, one of those questions that you have to come as a seminarian with, and then say, this is what my ministry is.
Right.
And how can this program be tailored to my needs, to the university's needs, and to ultimately meet the MFC needs, which is the Ministerial Fellowship Committee, for those unaware with all the abbreviations.
That's a good point, Roddy. Yeah. Yeah, and I think part of that process is, like you said, understanding the ways in which you want to be in ministry and acknowledging that, well, within yourself, and then I assume in your community, them
Mhm.
acknowledging the ways in which you can show up that is beyond in a parish. And yeah, I'm still in a discernment around where I want to do my internship and how, but it's this whole topic is definitely on my mind.
Just for Chris's internet went out, so they're frozen on the screen, and as soon as she gets it back, she'll be back. So mine is simply delayed here in Seattle. We're trying to figure the internet out. I don't know how any of this works. It's magic as far as I'm concerned. What would you, I mean, so I've been critical of the ministerial formation process. So I've been doing this, we're going on 2 decades, and here's the thing about Unitarian Universalism. As soon as you show any leadership, anything, people are like, go to seminary, And I'm
Yeah.
kind of like,
Yeah.
I love being a religious educator. And I got credentialed. I'm at the master level, all the credentials for religious education. I just didn't find that for me, seminary was, I've actually had a long conversation with Lucretia about it. There's actually quite a few people who've asked me for my opinion, and every single one went to seminary, and every single one I'm like, seminary is also not an option that you don't have to take anyway. So I find that funny. I've actually been inadvertently talking people into seminary. But I think my hope for every single one, my hope for the process is that it more closely reflects Unitarian Universal, who or what Unitarian Universalism can be in the world. And I think the process unhelpfully mirrors academia and getting like a PhD and Christianity. Like, yes, those are our grandparent religions, Judeo-Christian, but I'm not sure that we need to, and my understanding is it's changing. One of the co-lead ministers of the Church of Larger Fellowship, Reverend Dr. Michael Tino, is on the MFC. So my understanding is that the whole process is changing. But that book list, it is legendary how many people, I don't even know if one person has truly read every single one of those books. I think people skim them, and I don't know that you should. I don't know, is that really the best use of people's times? Instead of learning how to be emotionally intelligent and self-differentiated and learning how to not take things personally and not centering your ego and so on and so forth. Be quiet. I was trying to promise myself not to go on my tirade of how I feel about the ministerial formation process. It's great.
Yeah, I have so many thoughts. So I totally agree with your thoughts on making or allowing ministry to be so many things. Like, we need credentialed religious educators, we need administrators who know what they're doing, we need folks who understand finance, we need all of that. And all of those people, I think, serve vital roles in a congregation. And I also like the idea of someone, and I think, so per the MFC book list, I feel like those are necessary if you want to understand, and which I think ministers should understand, which is the roots of Unitarian Universalism, because a surprisingly high number of people that I talk to kind of aren't really concerned about the theology part of Unitarian Universalism. We don't really have, I came into it, for example, hearing you can kind of believe what you want as a Unitarian Universalist. And I was like, oh, super, right? But that's untethered to community, untethered to
Mhm.
the Judeo-Christian roots that you talk about, but also what universalism talks about, which is the, innate web of all things and God's love. And so I think it's crucial for people who are interested in talking to people about ethics, like ministers are, to know about the history of that. So I think you should absolutely study, train, and fight whatever it is that you're doing, and that's for everyone, not just ministers. And for me personally, and I'll end with this, is that uh, yeah, I really thought about your conversation, Aisha, because being a teacher, I love teaching. And so I was like, maybe that's exactly what I need to go into. But for me, it was the credentialing part of it that I needed, because I'm thinking maybe chaplaincy, I'm thinking maybe mental health counseling. And so I want that MDiv sort of certification. Like if I could do it a different way, maybe I would. But this kind of works for me. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Yeah, thank you for naming all of that just now, Lakeisha. I think for me, it is also about the credentialing piece of it and the calling that I did have. So, very early on in kind of the process of discernment as to, am I actually going to say yes to all of these people, as you named, Aisha? Like, people come up and say, hey, you should go to seminary if you express any form of leadership. For me, that was Alondra Williams coming up at Tennessee Valley. Hey, Roddy, when the hell are you going to seminary? As only E could say. And just kind of leaning into that and knowing kind of through conversations that for me, ministry meant parish ministry. With parish ministry comes MDivs, comes credentialing, comes the MFC, and those right now one way to do that. But does that mean that a DRE or a church administrator or a music director isn't doing ministry? Absolutely not. Does that mean that our congregants who are serving as board presidents, committee secretary or church secretaries, members of the social justice committee aren't doing ministry? Absolutely not, because they are. So I think for the way that we center ministry as being kind of the minister and has all of the power needs to shift. And it is shifting. But then there was also still going to be, and I feel needs to be, kind of that differentiation between what type of ministry are you called to, and someone who is called to be a ordained minister, as Lakeisha was naming, needs to kind of have this deeper understanding than somebody who is called to be the board president, or who is a DRE, who has kind of a different set of thoughts and needs, which is why Loretta exists. And there's a different credentialing board for credentialing religious educators, because it's a different set of expectations, it's a different need, it's a different community. But at the end of the day, we're all doing ministry together. And I can't do my ministry without the DREs, or without the music director, or without the board president, or the church administrator who's overseeing the money, because being dyslexic, you don't want me overseeing the money. I will mess it up. But ask me to go out and do public theology, I got you.
I think, yeah, I totally, I mean, I think, if I wanted to do that much reading about the Bible, I certainly would have gone to some, and that was also what turned me off. But here's what I'll say about Unitarian Universalism. I think I don't disagree with, in essence, of what you're saying about people have different callings. I think my experience has been, there are, I would say, every person who's gone through the process and passed through the MFC and is ordained, yes, can present an exegesis of blah blah from the Bible very well. Many of those folks have a difficult time in board meetings, and all their default is, I'm the minister, that's why you have to do X and such. How many times have there been negotiated resignation and ministers who don't learn, who want to be CEO, but don't know how to work with staff and aren't taught how to deal with conflict? So I think that where I'm coming from, and I think the lens that I think would more reflect a religion that doesn't say you're going to heaven or hell, that's not our theology at all, is how to be relational, how to model sitting in discomfort, how to model being a leader that doesn't center themselves, how to model what it means to live out Unitarian Universalism in the world. That I think is a harder process, because I think seminary and the ministerial formation process should be difficult. I think right now it's difficult in the wrong ways. I think it's difficult in ways that doesn't serve Unitarian Universalism. And so I think if we centered faith formation, I mean, my thing is, if you can't be approved to teach OWL, our whole life sexuality education, which there are quite a few ministers I've met who I'm like, I wouldn't approve you to teach OWL at all. So, but yet you are ordained to lead a whole congregation and aren't self-differentiated. And this isn't me. I mean, I'm not trying to bash ministers, but the reality is right now, ordained leadership still have an immense amount of power and authority. And the reason why people leave religions and leave Unitarian Universalism is when the hypocrisy of sometimes our leaders behave no differently than Catholic cardinals or Catholic who. So I'm not wanting to argue with either of you, because I think you're both amazing people, and I'm so glad you're going to be ministers in Unitarian Universalism. It's to say we need to grapple with our own the tension of the ways just having an ordination process in the way we do. I don't know that it's served Unitarian Universalism and who we say we want to be in the world. And I don't need to be right. It's just how I have experienced and lived Unitarian Universalism. I think there is an invitation to be much more expansive. I think we need our religious leaders. We need spiritual leaders. I think I've been spiritually led by, Glenn Thomas Rideout and Duro Farrar, who are amazing, extraordinary, gifted musicians. I've been, there are folks who are membership directors who have taught me a lot about how to be expansive in the way brick and mortar congregations can operate. So I've learned a lot from Tanner Linden, who's behind the chalice. So I think being expansive in how we live out Unitarian Universalism is more where I still think is missing from spiritual leadership. Does that make sense? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, I'm not just trying to be a jerk. I'm saying, like, I think we can be less hypocritical and less less like just mainstream religion. We have an opportunity to be truly different. I'll stop there.
No, I totally agree. And so I'll tell you, one of the reasons why I decided to go to seminary too was I also facilitate with Blue Chicago, and I was talking with them and also people that would come to our meetings, and they would say like, oh, we need like ministers like you for Blue. And I was like, what? And like, why me? And that is really part of my calling of decentering whiteness, decentering white supremacy, decentering capitalism, and the ways in which, and Blue is Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism. So many acronyms that I'm learning. And so decentering anti-capitalism, decentering the ways in which we interface with power is something that, I don't know if this would work in any other place. I'm thinking about going into the inside and trying to change it from within. That's kind of like, I kind of think of myself as like a secret agent in that way. So yeah, I totally agree with everything you say. And I feel like there is such a great opportunity here. Because our theology is so expansive. And for me, I personally I'm a book nerd, I'm a language nerd. So learning about translations of the Bible in Hebrew and Greek and understanding the mistranslations of all of that so that I can tell people when they say things, I'm like, well, actually, the Dead Sea Scroll, like, that's kind of how I want to be. And that's what I needed to know. I wanted a deeper theological grounding as well to be able to refute the things that was coming up in my spaces, and use that to, and this is a class that I'm taking this semester at Star King, which is educating to counter oppression. So I want to take what I've learned and like directly apply that to my communities.
Yeah, I think similarly, I went to seminary to be able to counter some of the toxic theology that I'd been given. And I didn't have the tools to kind of unpack that. So in seminary, one of the classes that I'm wrapping up for the semester is constructive theology. So when I went into seminary, telling and kind of similarly like going into UU space, oh, I can believe whatever I want. So I don't have to be Christian, right? I can kind of like leave all of that behind and do my own thing. That's really awesome. Come to find out in seminary, oh no, you're still a Christian, Roddy. And unpacking all of that and what does that mean, to the point where my final tone paper for my constructive theology class is all about queer Christian pedagogy and living into the margins, doing a bold new thing on the earth, and what that means for Unitarian Universalism and for faith. And that's something that for me, seminary was the answer. It was the way that I needed to unpack and unlearn and reconstruct, but that doesn't mean it's everyone's. And it doesn't mean that my journey would be any different than somebody who chooses to go a different way. It goes back to like knowing yourself, knowing your ministry, knowing what you need, and then being there to decenter it all. And what does that decentering look like for you in your ministry, in your context, in your identities?
Can I add one more thing?
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No,
I was just going to say, I'm thinking about liberation broadly, in terms of like our interconnected struggles of Black and Brown people all around the globe. And so just a large percentage of our communities are religious in some way or have some sort of meaning making that comes from religion. And so talking to people, helping to deconstruct all of that is like really important to me, because I feel like liberation movements, specifically on the left, if we're talking like radical left, don't really have an answer or want to interface with like what the radical right is saying. For example, they don't really want to interface because it's like, well, leave all that behind. Everyone who's political and radical is atheist, which is not the case. And so I want to be able to interface with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, and I also want to, because you mentioned Blue earlier, Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism, which was started in 2015. Elandria Williams was one of the founders, Leslie McFadden, Lena Gardner, Kenny Wiley, and Carlton Smith. Okay, I wanted to name that. We're not disagreeing. I think the part that, because I do think, to your point, Lucretia, very much the religious left, like I have a magnet on my fridge, member of the religious left, is that we need to not acquiesce to Christo-fascism that is taking root in this country, that we need to have a counter to that universal love. And, we are all connected, we are all loved, regardless of whether or not that love comes from a deity, where the point is that nobody's out of the sacred circle of love, right? I think we need our spiritual leaders. I don't at all disagree with that. And I think I think that the part that I kind of wish there was more relational, almost like, I think if you're going to get an MDiv, you have to get an MSW. I say that I have an MSW, but which is a Master in Social Work. Obviously, that's not the credentialing right now, but I think the understanding of how to be relational and how to be self-differentiated, I know there's some of it in the ministerial formation process. Truly, I don't think it's enough. And I say that as someone who's been impacted by less than self-differentiated ordained people who've supervised me, and now being in a position as part of the lead ministry team as a religious educator. I am not an ordained man, I'm a credentialed religious educator. So this is kind of a big deal for Unitarian Universalism, because this has not happened before in this way, right? And so how I think the opportunity is, or what I say to folks is, center Unitarian Universalism. Don't center anyone. Like, yes, we come in, we are the leaders, we're the spiritual leaders, we're faith leaders. And when we center the faith, then we are centering who we want to be in the world, how we want to show up in the world. Otherwise, what's the point of being part of a faith community? If it's just about any of, when I talk about Unitarian Universalism to non-UUs, they're very interested and they want to go, but I don't automatically recommend a UU congregation because I have to know who the minister is. I have to know who the religious educator is. Are they going to get harmed? Is it a person of color? I mean, but if we more often than not centered Unitarian Universalism rather than any one person's ministry, I would feel more comfortable sending people, no matter where they live, to a UU congregation. That's the part that I lament. Does that make sense to you both? Do you see what I'm saying?
Definitely. And I think that kind of does go back to we mentioned kind of at the top, Article 2's happening. So they're reevaluating all of that. So somewhere in Unitarian Universalism, there was also an identity crisis going on.
Yes.
So to center Unitarian Universalism, we have to be able to name what Unitarian Universalism is and what that looks like in the world, how we live into that, what theologies and identities and social locations we hold. And personally, I feel that we're beginning to see that perhaps some of the things that we thought Unitarian Universalism was before global pandemic, before Ferguson uprising, before George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and many more Black lives were murdered, that's shifting. So Article 2's work, Article 2 Study Commission's work has become even more important in centering Unitarian Universalism. So personally, I know I was thrilled when I saw that it was a complete rewrite, that they didn't even try to stay within the box. I know many people have said the principles are the lifeblood of Unitarian Universalism. I didn't come to the faith for the principles. I came because I liked the core. And that core isn't a list of 7 principles and 6 sources, which frankly, many of our ministers and congregants can't just name. We can't go to the street or to our church and say, name the 7 principles and 6 sources. But I can name that love is at the center. I can name that we're pluralistic. I can name that we side with generosity. I can name that we are here to evolve and to transform and to grow, which is kind of where Article 2 is heading. And to me, that's the center. That's what it means. So what you just said, Aisha, makes perfect sense. I just don't know if we can actually center something when we're trying to find out what that center is. And hopefully we name that center and then can begin building the Unitarian Universalism that we know that we can live into once we have a core in place.
And to me, I don't disagree. And I think one of the things I lament about that is since 1961, we've had so many people go to seminary, the whole thing. And we still don't know what the center is. I mean, I know what the center is, but at least what I live out. But yeah, it's not everybody else's. And so in terms of Unitarian Universalism. And so that's, again, it's like, so we've had this many people go through the ministerial formation process to study this very thing, to put in the world what it means to be UU. And in some ways, the whole believe anything you want, where the hell did that come from? I've been a religious educator for going on 2 decades. It's always annoyed us. Like, who the fuck's saying that? Stop it. No. What's the point? Then go join the why. Like, why? If you can believe whatever the fuck you want, why are you part of this? I don't understand. Like, no, you can't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely wondered who said that, like how, because that is what someone coming outside of this heard. Like that was one of the first things I heard about Unitarian Universalism was like, you can kind of do like what you want. It's like spirituality with like no strings, and that individualistic strain that is so strong in Unitarian Universalism is historic. I mean, it's historic for America, like so. And the history of Unitarians, the history of Universalism has been one of strong money, capitalist, individualistic views on how you're supposed to show up in a faith community. So it's hard to fight against the tide of that, but I'm hoping, I'm trying.
Well, yeah, I mean, so much. Yeah, I think so much. I mean, yeah, the individualism, and here's the thing that I separate for people, because I think here's where it comes from, to be fair. I think the idea that we do not dictate a dogma, because I grew up Muslim, like strict Muslim, right? 3 minutes. Okay, we got 3 more minutes. I'm going to get my thought out, Tanner. I think the idea that we do not attach how we are in the world to a belief in any kind of deity. In that respect, whether or not you believe in a deity, whether or not that is yours, what I tell people is how we show up in the world is what we commit to, is what we aspire to, in a way that centers liberation, love, that we want to make the world a better place. This is what I center. So in terms of, it's not that you can believe whatever you want. You can do that in terms of a deity, and whether or not you even want to attach yourself to whatever in terms of a deity, but not in terms of how we are. No one is an expert at being human. I've been saying this for a while now. So we're trying to figure it out. And even going to seminary doesn't make you an expert. Me having an MSW and credentialed educator doesn't make me an expert. We're trying to figure it out, and we're trying to do less harm. So we have, I don't know, 1 minute each. What are your last thoughts? And then this was a really great show. I'll go ahead, Roddy and Lucretia. What are your final profound thoughts that will go to the MFC directly? Just kidding.
I would say building your personal theology is super important. Faith formation is super important in the ways in which you can do that, so that you have your own strong structure that can support you as you move through the world.
So I feel like my last thoughts have to be words that aren't my own, because this person was a huge mentor and one of the reasons I'm here. So in the words of Londell Williams, you are worthy, not because of what you produce, but because of who you are. And so my invitation would be to lean into who you are as we lean into who we will be.
Amen and Ashe. Thank you both so much for joining us on this week's episode. What a great way to kick off this.
Thank you for joining us. Special thanks to those of you who give generously to this ministry. It is because of you that this ministry is possible. You can click the link in the description to give now, or visit clfuu.org/give for more information. We hope you will join us next week for another episode of The View.